Massachusetts is filled with ancient mysteries hidden beneath its quiet forests, old towns, and rocky landscapes. From forgotten caves and abandoned cemeteries to haunted forests and strange stone sites, these places carry stories that still confuse historians and frighten visitors today. Some are linked to war, others to ghosts and legends, but all of them leave behind one question: what really happened there long ago? King Philip's Cave. There is a quiet place hidden among the woods and rocky hills of Massachusetts, where history still feels close enough to touch. At first glance, it just looks like another group of old stone formations surrounded by trees and rough paths. Birds move through the branches. Wind pushes softly through the leaves. In autumn, the ground disappears under orange and brown leaves, and during winter the rocks become cold and silent under patches of snow. But this place carries a story that has lasted for hundreds of years. A story filled with war, fear, survival, and mystery. This is the story of King Philip's Cave. The cave is connected to a man named Metacomet, the Native American leader known to English settlers as King Philip. Even today, his name still carries weight in New England history. Some people see him as a warrior trying to protect his people and their land. Others remember him as the leader of one of the bloodiest conflicts in early American history. But no matter how people view him, there is no question that his story changed Massachusetts forever. Back in the 1600s, the land around modern-day Massachusetts was very different from what we see now. Thick forests covered huge areas. Small native villages stood near rivers and lakes. English settlements were growing larger every year, pushing farther into lands that native tribes had lived on for generations. Tensions slowly built between the settlers and the Wampanoag people, led by Metacomet. At first, there had been periods of peace. Metacomet's father, Massasoit, had worked with the English settlers years earlier. But over time, trust broke apart. More settlers arrived, more land was taken. Native traditions and authority weakened under colonial pressure. By the 1670s, anger and fear had grown on both sides. Then came the war known today as King Philip's War. It was brutal, fast, and deeply personal. Villages burned, families disappeared, entire communities lived in fear. Historians still describe it as one of the deadliest wars per person in American history. And somewhere during this conflict, according to local stories, Metacomet used this hidden cave as a temporary shelter and meeting place. The cave itself is not enormous. People expecting a giant underground system are usually surprised. It is more like a natural stone shelter formed by massive boulders leaning together in a way that creates a protected opening beneath them. But what makes it powerful is not its size, it is the feeling surrounding it. When visitors walk through the woods toward the cave today, many say the atmosphere changes the closer they get. The forest becomes quieter. The rocks seem older than the land around them. Some people feel calm there. Others feel uneasy without understanding why. Part of that feeling probably comes from the history itself. Imagine the scene nearly 350 years ago, Metacomet and his followers moving silently through these woods at night. Fires kept low to avoid detection. Scouts watching for colonial soldiers. Every sound in the forest becoming a possible danger. The cave was hidden well among rocky terrain, making it a useful place for temporary refuge. Local tradition says Metacomet gathered warriors there while trying to avoid English forces hunting him across the region. Whether every detail of these stories is fully true or partly shaped by legend, the location became forever connected to him. One reason the story survived so strongly is because King Philip's War left scars across New England. Entire towns were destroyed during the fighting. Some settlements disappeared completely. Native communities suffered terrible losses as well. By the end of the war in 1676, thousands were dead. Metacomet himself was eventually killed near Mount Hope in present-day Rhode Island. But places connected to him remained. The cave became one of them. Over the years, local residents passed down stories about strange events around the site. Some claimed they heard voices echoing through the rocks when nobody else was there. Others believed the cave carried the restless energy of those who once hid there during the war. In older ghost stories from the area, people even claimed to see shadowy figures among the trees at dusk. Of course, stories grow larger with time. Every generation adds its own layer. A cold wind becomes a spirit. A strange sound in the woods becomes a ghostly warning. That happens in many historic places. But what makes King Philip's Cave different is that real suffering and real fear truly happened here during a violent time in history. That truth alone gives the place emotional weight. Even the landscape feels designed for secrecy. The cave sits among rough stone formations that naturally block visibility from a distance. If someone unfamiliar with the area walked nearby centuries ago, they could easily miss it completely. That isolation probably helped keep the location hidden during the conflict. Today, reaching the cave requires a walk through wooded trails. The path is peaceful now compared to the fear-filled days of the 1600s. Hikers, photographers, and history lovers visit throughout the year. Some people come because they love colonial history. Others come searching for paranormal experiences. And some simply want to stand in a place connected to such an important chapter of early American history. The current condition of the site is fairly natural and undeveloped, which honestly adds to its atmosphere. It does not feel overly commercial or artificial. The forest still surrounds the rocks much like it did long ago. Moss grows across parts of the stone surfaces. Tree roots twist through the ground nearby. During rainy weather, the rocks become dark and slippery, giving the cave an even more ancient appearance. At the same time, the site does show signs of modern visitors. Graffiti has appeared on some rocks over the years, which many people feel damages the historic feeling of the location. Some areas have also experienced erosion from constant foot traffic. Still, compared to heavily tourist-filled historical spots, King Philip's Cave remains relatively quiet. That quietness may be one reason why the stories still feel alive there. When people stand inside the cave, many realize how vulnerable those hiding there must have felt. The shelter offers protection, but not complete safety. It is easy to imagine the anxiety of waiting in darkness while enemy forces searched nearby forests. In some ways, the cave represents the final stage of resistance. A leader once powerful enough to command large groups of warriors reduced to hiding among rocks while the world around him collapsed. That emotional image stayed deeply rooted in New England memory. There are also debates among historians about how directly Metacomet actually used the cave. Some believe local tradition exaggerated the connection over time. Others think it genuinely served as one of several hiding locations during the war. Historical records from that period are incomplete, and many native oral histories were never fully preserved by colonial writers. Because of that, certain details remain uncertain. Personally, I think the uncertainty actually makes the site more interesting. History is rarely clean and perfect. Real events blur together with memory, storytelling, and local legend. Places like King Philip's Cave sit in that strange middle ground between documented history and living folklore. Even if every old story cannot be proven, the emotions connected to them still matter. And honestly, standing there today, it is not difficult to understand why legends formed around the cave. The woods in that part of Massachusetts can feel isolated very quickly, especially during evening hours. As sunlight fades, the trees create long shadows across the rocks. The air cools down fast. Small sounds become louder. A snapping branch somewhere deeper in the forest suddenly grabs your attention. Even modern visitors with phones and hiking gear sometimes admit the area feels unsettling after dark. Some paranormal investigators have visited the site hoping to capture evidence of supernatural activity. A few claim to have recorded strange sounds or sudden cold spots near the cave. Others report feelings of being watched. Skeptics argue that the environment itself naturally creates these reactions. Dense woods, historical violence, and isolation can easily affect the human mind. I tend to look at it somewhere in the middle. I do not know if places truly hold spiritual energy from the past, but I do think human emotion can leave a strong impression on certain locations. When terrible fear, violence, or suffering happens somewhere, people often continue feeling that emotional weight centuries later. Whether that is paranormal or psychological probably depends on personal belief. Another thing that makes King Philip's Cave fascinating is how it reflects the larger story of early America. Many old history books once presented colonial expansion as simple progress, but places like this remind us the reality was much more painful and complicated. Native tribes were not just background figures disappearing quietly from history. They fought desperately to survive and protect their homes. Metacomet became a symbol of that resistance. To some native communities today, he is remembered not as a villain, but as a leader forced into impossible choices. Meanwhile, colonial records often described him as dangerous and destructive. The truth probably contains parts of both views. War changes everyone involved. Fear pushes people into terrible actions. That complexity gives the cave lasting importance beyond ghost stories or local legends. In recent years, there has been growing interest in preserving Native American history more respectfully across New England. Sites connected to Native leaders are receiving more attention from historians and educators. King Philip's Cave remains part of that conversation. Visitors are encouraged not only to chase mystery, but also to understand the deeper human story behind the location. And honestly, I think that is important. Too many historical places become simplified into tourist attractions, while the real emotional meaning disappears. But when you learn about the families destroyed during King Philip's War, the villages burned, and the fear felt on all sides, the cave becomes more than just a strange rock formation in the woods. It becomes a symbol of survival, loss, and memory. Right now, the site remains accessible to visitors willing to walk the wooded trails. Nature has reclaimed much of the surrounding area, which helps preserve the atmosphere. During fall especially, the location becomes incredibly beautiful. Sunlight filters through colorful leaves onto the stone surfaces, creating a peaceful scene that almost hides the violent history connected to it. That contrast stayed with me the most. The forest feels calm now. Birds sing, wind moves gently through the trees. Yet beneath that peaceful surface is the memory of a desperate time when people hid there, hoping to survive another night. It is strange how nature slowly softens places connected to tragedy without ever fully erasing what happened. In my opinion, King Philip's Cave is one of the most emotionally powerful historical mystery sites in Massachusetts, not because of massive ruins or dramatic supernatural claims, but because it feels real. The fear feels real. The struggle feels real. Even the uncertainty surrounding the stories feels human. Some mysteries are interesting because they seem impossible. Others stay with you because they remind you how complicated people and history truly are. This place belongs in the second category. And when you finally leave the cave and walk back through the quiet woods, there is a good chance you will keep looking over your shoulder at those old rocks one last time, wondering how many untold stories still remain hidden there. Spidergate Cemetery. Deep in the quiet woods of Massachusetts, hidden behind narrow roads and old trees, there is a cemetery that has built one of the darkest reputations in New England. People whisper about ghosts there. Some talk about strange rituals. Others claim they heard voices in the woods at night or saw figures moving between the gravestones when nobody else was around. Over the years, stories became larger, darker, and more disturbing. And at the center of all those rumors stands Spidergate Cemetery. The strange thing is that if you visit during the daytime, the cemetery does not immediately look frightening. In fact, it looks peaceful. The area is surrounded by forest and quiet walking paths. Birds move through the trees. Sunlight falls gently across old gravestones. But the deeper history of the place, mixed with decades of rumors and paranormal stories, completely changed the way people see it. The cemetery officially belongs to an old Quaker meeting house nearby. Quakers were known for living simple lives focused on peace and prayer. Their burial grounds were usually plain and quiet compared to larger cemeteries filled with huge statues and decorations. Spidergate Cemetery began as one of those modest resting places. The name itself already sounds unsettling, but interestingly, the cemetery was not originally called Spider Gates. The nickname came from the design of the iron gates near the entrance. The metal patterns resemble a spider web shape, and over time local people began calling the place Spidergate Cemetery. Once that name spread, the darker legends quickly followed. And honestly, the name alone feels like something from a horror movie. As the years passed, stories around the cemetery became more extreme. Teenagers sneaked into the woods at night, daring each other to enter. Paranormal investigators brought cameras and recording devices, hoping to capture evidence of ghosts. Local rumors claimed the cemetery was connected to satanic rituals and occult gatherings during the 1970s and 1980s. Some stories even claimed missing people were linked to the woods around the cemetery. Others said strange symbols once appeared near graves or trees deep in the forest. Whether those stories were true, exaggerated, or completely invented became difficult to separate over time. That is often how legends grow. One strange story leads to another. A rumor becomes accepted as fact after enough retellings. Eventually, the place itself becomes trapped inside its own reputation. Still, Spidergate Cemetery gained enough attention that paranormal groups from outside Massachusetts started visiting regularly. Some investigators claimed they recorded unexplained whispers. Others reported sudden cold spots, strange shadows, or feelings of panic while walking through the cemetery after dark. A few visitors described hearing footsteps behind them, even when nobody else was nearby. Others claimed they felt physically sick while standing near certain graves. There are even stories about people becoming disoriented in the woods and losing track of time. Skeptics argue that fear and expectation explain most of these experiences, and honestly, that explanation makes sense in many cases. When people enter a place already expecting something frightening, the human mind becomes extremely alert. Every sound feels suspicious. Every shadow looks unusual. Wind through trees suddenly sounds like whispers. But even knowing that, the atmosphere there can still feel deeply uncomfortable. Part of it comes from the isolation. The cemetery sits far enough away from busy streets that the woods absorb much of the outside noise. During the evening, the silence becomes heavy. The paths through the forest grow darker quickly once the sun starts going down. Branches crack under your feet. Trees block the moonlight in certain areas. Even experienced hikers sometimes admit the place feels unsettling after dark. And then there is the cemetery itself. Many of the gravestones are old and weathered. Some are tilted from age. Moss grows across parts of the stone. In certain weather conditions, fog settles low among the graves and creates a scene that feels almost unreal. During autumn especially, when dead leaves cover the ground and cold wind moves through the trees, the cemetery becomes exactly the kind of place where ghost stories feel believable. One reason Spidergate Cemetery became so famous is because of the internet. Before online videos and paranormal websites, the stories remained mostly local legends shared between people in Massachusetts. But once ghost hunters started posting videos and urban legends spread online, the cemetery gained national attention. Suddenly, people from across the country were driving there, looking for supernatural experiences. Unfortunately, that attention created problems for the site itself. Over the years, vandalism became a serious issue. Some visitors damaged gravestones, others left trash behind or disturbed the peaceful nature of the cemetery. Local authorities eventually increased monitoring of the area because too many people treated the site like an amusement park instead of a real burial ground where families still come to remember loved ones. Today, the cemetery remains active and cared for, but officials strongly discourage nighttime visits and trespassing. Police patrol the area more often now because of the long history of paranormal tourism and reckless behavior. Personally, I think that part of the story says something important about human curiosity. People are naturally drawn toward places connected to death and mystery. Cemeteries remind us of our own mortality, and when you mix that with rumors about ghosts or dark rituals, fascination grows even stronger. But sometimes the mystery becomes so popular that people forget real human beings are buried there. That is easy to lose sight of when the internet turns places into legends. The actual history of the cemetery is much quieter and sadder than many of the wild rumors suggest. Most of the people buried there lived ordinary lives. Families buried parents, children, and relatives there over generations. Many graves date back hundreds of years. The cemetery reflects real community history, not just ghost stories. Still, the darker legends never disappeared. One of the most repeated stories claims there is a hidden path near the cemetery connected to the 8 Gates of Hell urban legend. According to this rumor, passing through all the gates supposedly leads a person into another world or traps them spiritually. Different versions of the story exist across America, but Spidergate Cemetery became linked to one of the most famous versions in New England. There is no evidence supporting the story, of course, but legends like that survive because they tap into deep fears people already carry. Fear of death, fear of the unknown, fear of crossing into places we should not enter. And honestly, walking those dark wooded trails at night, it is not hard to understand how such stories started. The woods themselves seem designed for imagination. Long tree shadows stretch across the paths. Certain areas become almost completely silent. Sometimes fog moves between the trees so slowly that it feels like the forest itself is breathing. Even during daytime visits, there is a strange emotional weight hanging over the place. Not evil exactly, more like sadness mixed with isolation. That feeling became even stronger for me when learning about the Quaker background connected to the cemetery. Quakers believed strongly in peace, humility, and simplicity. The idea that one of their quiet burial grounds later became famous for horror stories and paranormal rumors feels deeply ironic. I sometimes wonder what the original families buried there would think if they knew people now travel across the country searching for demons and ghosts among their graves. Probably confusion more than anything else. At the same time, I think places absorb emotional meaning over time, whether we intend it or not. Once thousands of people repeatedly tell frightening stories about a location, the atmosphere changes psychologically. Visitors arrive expecting darkness, and that expectation shapes their experience. Fear becomes part of the location's identity. Spidergate Cemetery is a perfect example of that process. There are also reports from paranormal investigators who claim electronic devices malfunction there. Some say camera batteries drain unusually fast. Others report static interference during recordings. Skeptics point out that cold weather, poor equipment conditions, and human error easily explain many of these situations. Still, those stories continue spreading because they fit the cemetery's reputation so perfectly. One thing I noticed while researching the site is how many visitors describe feeling emotionally drained afterward. Not necessarily terrified, but emotionally heavy. That reaction honestly makes sense to me. Cemeteries naturally force people into reflection. Add dark legends, isolation, and old graves surrounded by forest, and the emotional effect becomes stronger. Today, the condition of Spidergate Cemetery is mixed. The cemetery itself is maintained reasonably well, considering its age and constant attention from visitors. Many gravestones remain intact, though weather and time have worn down some inscriptions. The nearby woods remain beautiful, but also show signs of heavy foot traffic from paranormal tourism. Some paths are muddy and uneven, especially after rain. Security and monitoring around the area increased over recent years because authorities want to protect both the cemetery and visitors. The peaceful atmosphere still exists during daylight hours, but the place also carries the strange tension created by decades of frightening stories. In my opinion, Spidergate Cemetery is most interesting not because I believe it is literally haunted, but because it shows how fear grows around real places. A simple cemetery slowly transformed into one of New England's most famous paranormal legends through storytelling, rumor, imagination, and human emotion. That transformation itself is fascinating. I also think many people confuse emotional discomfort with supernatural activity. Standing among old graves deep in isolated woods naturally affects the human mind. It reminds us how temporary life is. Silence becomes heavier. Darkness feels deeper. The imagination starts working harder. And once fear enters the brain, ordinary things stop feeling ordinary. A moving branch becomes a shadow figure. Wind sounds like whispering voices. Footsteps echo differently in the woods. Suddenly, every detail feels important. But even understanding all that logically, I have to admit Spidergate Cemetery still unsettles me. Not because I expect to see ghosts walking between the graves, but because the place carries such a strange emotional atmosphere built over generations. Real grief exists there. Real history exists there. And on top of that sits layer after layer of human fear and imagination. That combination creates something powerful. If you visit today during the afternoon, you will probably see a quiet cemetery surrounded by beautiful woods, maybe a few hikers passing nearby, maybe sunlight shining softly across old gravestones. It can actually feel peaceful. But if you stay too late, when the light fades and the woods begin turning dark around the cemetery, you may start understanding why the stories never disappeared. Because some places do not need monsters to feel haunted. Freetown-Fall River State Forest. There are forests that feel peaceful the moment you enter them. You hear birds singing, wind moving through the trees, and the sound of leaves under your shoes. But then there are forests that feel different. Forests where the silence seems too heavy. Places where even during the daytime, you get the strange feeling that something is watching from deeper inside the woods. In Massachusetts, one of the most famous places connected to that feeling is Freetown-Fall River State Forest. This forest has become one of the darkest mystery locations in New England. Over the years, it gained a reputation connected to ghost stories, disappearances, strange creatures, cult rumors, murders, UFO sightings, and unexplained events. Some people believe the forest is cursed. Others think fear and imagination simply turned an ordinary woodland area into a modern legend. But no matter what someone believes, this place has a reputation that refuses to disappear. The forest sits inside the larger region known as the Bridgewater Triangle, an area already famous for paranormal stories stretching across southeastern Massachusetts. For decades, locals reported strange things happening there. Phantom lights moving through swamps at night, shadow figures crossing isolated roads, giant creatures seen between trees. Some people even claimed to hear screaming sounds deep in the woods when nobody else was around. At first, these stories spread quietly through local communities. Teenagers shared them around campfires. Families warned children not to wander too far into certain parts of the forest. Hunters and hikers occasionally reported strange experiences, but often avoided speaking publicly because they feared being laughed at. Then the stories started growing larger. By the 1970s and 1980s, rumors connected the forest to satanic cult activity. According to local stories, hidden groups supposedly gathered deep inside the woods for rituals. Some people claimed they found strange symbols carved into trees or rocks. Others reported seeing fires burning at night far from any trails. Police investigated some of these reports over the years, though solid evidence was often limited. Still, the rumors became deeply connected to the forest's identity. And honestly, the forest already looked like the perfect place for dark stories. Large sections are isolated and thick with trees. Swampy areas create heavy fog during certain weather conditions. Some trails disappear into dense woodland where sunlight barely reaches the ground. At night, the darkness becomes almost complete in certain areas. Even experienced hikers say it is easy to lose direction there. One reason the forest became so feared was because real crimes also happened nearby. Several murders and violent incidents in the surrounding region became tied to the forest in public imagination. Whether every story truly connected to the woods is another question, but once real violence mixes with paranormal legends, fear grows much stronger. People begin viewing the forest itself as dangerous. One of the strangest parts of the legend involves reports of unusual creatures. Witnesses described giant black animals moving through the trees. Some claimed to see something like a massive dog with glowing eyes. Others spoke about tall, shadowy figures standing silently near trails before disappearing into darkness. There are even stories connected to Bigfoot-like creatures in the area. Of course, skeptics argue there are reasonable explanations for most sightings. Poor lighting, fear, wildlife, and imagination can easily distort what people think they see. A deer moving suddenly through fog at night can appear terrifying under the wrong conditions. But the stories continued anyway. The paranormal reputation of the forest exploded even more after books, documentaries, and internet videos focused on the Bridgewater Triangle. Suddenly, the woods became famous far beyond Massachusetts. Ghost hunters arrived carrying cameras and recording devices. Urban explorers entered abandoned areas searching for evidence of cult activity. Horror fans traveled there hoping to experience something supernatural. And many left saying the forest felt wrong somehow. That description appears again and again from visitors. Not necessarily haunted in the movie-style sense, but emotionally disturbing. People describe a feeling of uneasiness that begins shortly after entering certain areas of the woods. Personally, I think environment plays a huge role in that feeling. The forest is naturally heavy and isolated. Swamps absorb sound in strange ways. Fog changes visibility quickly. Trails twist through dense woodland where every shadow seems deeper. Human beings evolve to feel cautious in environments like that. Our brains become more alert when visibility drops and unfamiliar sounds surround us. But even understanding that logically, the atmosphere there can still feel deeply uncomfortable. One particularly disturbing story connected to the forest involves reports of hanging animal remains found deep in the woods years ago. Some people believed these discoveries supported rumors of occult rituals. Others argued the stories became exaggerated over time, or were the actions of disturbed individuals unrelated to organized cult activity. Still, those reports helped push the forest's reputation even darker. Another major reason the forest became so legendary is because of how many different mysteries overlap there. Usually one place becomes famous for a single type of paranormal story. Maybe ghosts, maybe UFOs, maybe cryptids. But Freetown-Fall River State Forest somehow became connected to nearly everything at once. Ghost sightings, strange creatures, cult rumors, disappearances, unexplained lights, paranormal experiences. That combination created the feeling that the entire forest itself was somehow cursed. There are also stories from people who claimed electronics stopped working properly in certain areas. Flashlights flickering unexpectedly, phone signals disappearing, cameras malfunctioning. Skeptics point out that thick forest coverage and battery issues easily explain most of these situations. Still, paranormal investigators continue visiting regularly. Some claim to hear voices whispering from deeper in the woods. Others report sudden cold areas even during warm nights. A few describe hearing footsteps nearby when nobody else appears visible. One thing that fascinates me about this forest is how strongly it affects human imagination. The moment people hear the stories, every normal forest sound suddenly feels suspicious. Wind through branches sounds like whispers. Animal cries become terrifying screams. Shadows between trees seem alive. Fear completely changes the way people experience nature. And honestly, that may be part of the real mystery here. The forest acts almost like a mirror for human fear. People enter expecting darkness, and their minds begin shaping ordinary experiences into something much larger. At the same time, there is genuine tragedy connected to the area. The surrounding region experienced real violence and real suffering over the years. Families lost loved ones. Crimes occurred. That emotional weight became attached to the landscape itself. I think places connected to pain often continue carrying emotional energy long afterward, whether supernatural or psychological. During daytime visits now, parts of the forest actually look beautiful. Sunlight filters through tall trees. Trails wind peacefully around ponds and rocky areas. Birds and insects fill the air with sound. Hikers, bikers, and nature lovers regularly use sections of the forest without experiencing anything unusual. But there are still areas that feel isolated very quickly once you move away from the more popular paths. As evening approaches, the atmosphere changes fast. Fog sometimes settles low over swampy ground. Shadows stretch longer across the trails. The woods become quieter. And once darkness fully arrives, the forest feels enormous. That is when many of the stories begin. Some visitors describe hearing movement in the trees nearby. Others claim they suddenly feel watched. A few report intense panic without understanding why. Paranormal believers see these reactions as proof the forest contains something unnatural. Personally, I think the answer is probably more complicated. I do not believe every rumor connected to the forest is true. Over decades, stories clearly became exaggerated through retelling. The internet especially amplified many legends far beyond their original versions. But I also do not think the emotional effect of the place should be dismissed completely. Some locations genuinely affect people differently. Isolation, darkness, history, and fear combine to create powerful psychological experiences. The human brain reacts strongly to environments where visibility is limited and danger feels possible. Freetown-Fall River State Forest creates exactly that kind of environment. There are also abandoned areas and old structures near parts of the forest that add to its unsettling reputation. Broken foundations, forgotten roads, and hidden clearings naturally inspire curiosity. Urban explorers searching these areas sometimes report finding strange objects left behind, though many discoveries likely come from modern visitors rather than ancient mysteries. Still, abandoned places always attract stories. One thing that stands out to me is how locals often speak about the forest differently from tourists. Many local residents do not necessarily claim the woods are literally haunted, but they still avoid certain areas at night. It is more like deep respect mixed with caution. That reaction says a lot. Usually when stories survive across generations, they contain at least some emotional truth underneath the exaggeration. Maybe not demons or monsters, but real experiences that made people uncomfortable enough to keep warning others. Today, the condition of the forest is both beautiful and troubled. Nature remains strong there. Thick woods still cover large areas. Wildlife continues living throughout the region. Some trails are maintained reasonably well and attract outdoor visitors year-round. During autumn especially, the forest becomes visually stunning with red and orange leaves covering the landscape. But there are also signs of damage from years of paranormal tourism and illegal activity. Trash appears in some isolated spots. Graffiti exists in certain areas. Some unofficial trails became worn down from constant exploration. Authorities continue monitoring the forest because of trespassing, vandalism, and safety concerns after dark. And honestly, that may be wise. Large, isolated forests can become dangerous even without paranormal activity. People get lost. Injuries happen. Darkness changes orientation quickly. Add fear and panic into the situation, and simple problems become much worse. Still, fascination with the forest continues growing. Movies, documentaries, podcasts, and online videos keep introducing new audiences to the legends. Every year, more visitors arrive hoping to experience something strange for themselves. Most probably leave without seeing anything supernatural. But many still leave unsettled, and I understand why. There is something about the forest that stays in your mind afterward. Maybe it is the silence. Maybe it is the heavy atmosphere created by decades of stories. Maybe it is simply knowing how much fear and tragedy became connected to that landscape over time. In my opinion, Freetown-Fall River State Forest is most powerful as a psychological mystery rather than a supernatural one. The woods show how human fear grows, spreads, and transforms ordinary places into legendary ones. Once enough stories gather around a location, the place itself begins feeling different, even to people who do not believe in ghosts. That is fascinating to me, because in the end, the scariest thing in the forest may not be monsters hiding in the dark. It may be the way the human mind reacts when surrounded by isolation, mystery, and the unknown. And if you ever walk those trails late in the evening, when fog moves slowly through the trees and the forest becomes silent around you, there is a good chance you will understand exactly why the legends of Freetown-Fall River State Forest are still alive today.